All right, 7 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Maybe Scott will join us.
He must have drove instead of flying.
I think he's probably walking.
Whoa. He said be there at 5, so we'll go ahead and get started. Brian, go ahead. It's coming out of your committee. So.
Okay, what we talked about in the legislative committee at the last meeting planning this, originally we were going to do economic development and infrastructure, and we decided infrastructure is so big, it's going to take us a work session for that. So the mayor agreed to push that one off until, is that the next one in March? In March, and so we'll just focus on economic development today. We had some really good discussion in committee based on the topics that we have down here, but it's open to anything else too. So these are just examples. But first of all, I said that we would check in on the vision statement, and if everybody's okay with moving forward with keeping that. Does anybody have any additions or anything that they notice that they want to change?
No, I think we like it.
Okay, and I anticipate we'll be good from here on out, but I'll just keep asking.
Sure.
A couple of the goals that we had from that work session on that Saturday in June was to develop a plan for tourism, to increase tourism opportunities, and to establish a task force to evaluate incentives and attract developers for residential and commercial growth. And so those are the two things that we talked about in legislative committee. One of the things with tourism, we were thinking about learning more about Main Street and how that would impact
Sure.
at least tourism for downtown. So I don't know if you want to talk about Main Street now, or you want to wait until we get down further on the list to talk about that.
Well, Glenn, what do you think?
Let's wait a little while.
Okay.
Get through
We
some
may
of
not
these other
know
things.
how it applies to tourism yet either.
Yeah, that might have to come
Well,
later on as
It is. I think the first goal is to set up the committees, obviously,
Right.
and get those set up and organized. And we as a city kind of take a step back. Now it's the businesses and everyone else who kind of take it from here with that guidance from the consultants pending the announcement. So and then I think you develop your strategic plan within those committees as sort of a cohesive deal. So I think what we do here is gonna be handed off, at least a part of it, to that. We just need to wait.
So I think as far as this plan goes, this is just my thought, is to kind of wait and see how that develops, because I'm not sure what else we can do at this point to put a plan for tourism together.
Yeah.
It's a good starting point. It may not be the whole plan, but I think
Right.
it'll be really a cornerstone for what it is we want.
I agree.
Anticipate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, as you look down on this toolbox and this list, I just read through that. I think some of the things on there, what we could do to help while we wait for Main Street, maybe start promoting these. We haven't done a real good job at promoting the tools that we do have already, and really we promoted NRP quite a bit that first year we were on council. But I think even coming up with some sort of promotional package around the incentives that we offer in town may be pretty beneficial, and then would help support the Main Street initiatives.
One of the things that I've noticed about how other cities view tourism, a lot of them have changed the terminology to destination. So I saw a job opening in El Dorado for a destination coordinator. So the word tourism sometimes might imply people coming in from out of town, which is great, we want that, but we also have events that we all go to, like barbecue competitions or things at Sullivan Square. So it might be something that we think about as we move forward. Even that terminology, tourism, what does that mean? Or are we really talking about things that, the store doesn't know any difference between my dollar and a dollar from somewhere else, in my opinion. So just something, food for thought to think about as we go forward.
Sure.
Thanks, Scott.
So Scott, we're talking about, I don't know if do you have one of the agendas?
Laura sent, or is this something else?
Yeah. Okay. Talking about what we talked about in legislative committee. keeping this an economic development session, and then next month we'll move on to infrastructure. But we're at number 3 on developing a plan for tourism. And we were talking about Main Street. Corey shared a little bit about what's going on so far, but that will develop as we continue. Those committees, I think, will help us form a plan for tourism. So that's where we're at right now. Any other thoughts on that? I think as we move forward with this plan, we can build that in. And as we do those quarterly check-ins that we talked about,
Right.
we'll be able to know more and plug more in as we go.
Yeah, I think by the time we do this next time quarterly, we'll have a lot more guidance and information. If the announcement's made that, you know, we're in, and we can go from there.
And hopefully we'll know more about what's possible, like festivals, Maple Leaf, that kind of thing. Anticipate
Right.
that's possible in October. We just don't know yet. And we haven't been given the all clear to open it up to anything. So
Sure.
hopefully we'll know more as we come back. Any other thoughts then on that topic? Okay, if not, we'll move on to the next big item that we have, and that's another reason we have so many things in our toolbox that we can kind of build around that and talk about, but to establish a task force to evaluate incentives and attract developers for residential and commercial growth. And this sparked a lot of good conversation in our committee meeting about what this could look like as far as a committee, and also our toolbox that we have listed down here. So I guess what we need to do as a council is think about what that might look like, that committee or that, whatever we called it. Can't remember. Task force.
Well, I would assume it would be like any other committee where there was a citizen component. I would kind of envision maybe that, having some kind of presence. You know, as far as a committee.
Yeah, I mean, I think you definitely have to set it up with the industry, people in our community that already work in this industry. If you
Sure.
get it directly from the horse's mouth on exactly what they're looking for, that will drive them to the next level on developing or building or commercial or whatever, you know. And then, you know, people that work outside of our community, because we also want to know what are other communities doing that's attracting that commercial aspect. Specifically commercial, I mean, you know, we're doing fairly good in the residential. I wouldn't say we're gangbusters by any means, but we're doing good there. But that commercial component is, you know, outside of Casey's, we haven't had any big commercial development in quite a while.
Mhm.
So, and then how do we do that? You know, how can the city help that commercial aspect? Is I think I talked in the committee a little bit, Ryan, that I can't remember what committee it was, but you know, right now our rent involvement supports $80 a square foot purchase price on a building, when new development is $200 a square foot to build. So how do you close that gap? How does that gap shrink? I think that's really going to be the big key in all of this, to try to get those type of projects.
So I think as far as this plan goes, it's my feeling that this needs a home for a committee here within the city to work on. So I don't know if it's CDC or how you see it.
Well, that's what I was asking. Is it a CDC thing, or is it a branch off on its own?
I think almost you have to, you know, the CDC can be the home for it,
Mhm.
but I think if you want to truly know, truly get a feel for it, you have to almost set up a separate committee outside with council involved,
Mhm.
but a group of citizens.
Yeah, I agree. I just meant something so that the council has something that
Yes.
we can get information back for us, but I totally agree that it's separate and outside and we have involvement, but as we do this plan, a place for it to be developed so
Yeah,
that we
I'd
can
say
identify
CDC.
how that works.
Yeah.
So is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Larry?
Yep. That's
Okay.
just fine.
So I think as far as that goes, we can continue to talk about how that works, but I just feel it needed someplace, a starting point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Instead of just us guessing how that would go.
Hey Corey, has there been any discussion on Main Street about the economic development piece and growth and these elements, do you think that's going to be part of the committees that are established through that program, or do we know enough yet to?
Yeah, I mean, so as at least, you know, specific to downtown, and you have to remember the Main Street and Chamber in this scenario would be together. So yeah, there's going to be that Main Street component of it that's going to be also a subsidiary of the big picture. But yeah, economic development's one of the 4 pillars there, one of the 4, it's called something else.
4 principles and one of 4 committees. Yeah,
Right,
as,
right.
as economic development.
Right.
So that'll be a big part of what they do.
But again, if that resides just in Main Street, that's
Right.
focused on downtown.
Right.
versus-
Well,
It could, but it couldn't be part of the. I mean, we're going to restructure our Chamber of Commerce along with Main Street, so and there's that possibility there.
I really feel like with consolidating it all into the 501c3 that all these same principles and strategic planning that we kind of with the folks of downtown will translate to the highway businesses and elsewhere. I don't see how it couldn't. It's going to be a lot of the same people on the chamber board on those
Right.
committees. You know, it's just there's going to be too much crossover. I think for the purposes of Main Street, it has to stay somewhat in its own lane, but I can't see it not branching out and us applying those same principles elsewhere. I just can't. And that's been shared as well when we've had those discussions with them, that they've seen a lot of that. And when I've called over to the other towns that have consolidated the two, it's a lot of that same kind of sentiment, just kind of one.
So there may be some overlap, like we don't know if it addresses like developer incentives or annexation, you know, things to try to expand your footprint. It may or may not, I don't know how a Main Street necessarily has a growth.
So when we presented last Monday, that was one of the questions that the National Main Street lady asked. She said, you know, you're talking about your downtown's 95 to 100% capacity already, occupancy. You know, what are you going to do about that? And, we kind of talked about, there's some, you know, some spaces above some of these buildings that are, you know, could be utilized. You know, there's some people maybe downtown that could be better fit out in another location and vice versa. You know, and that's kind of for them to come in and give their opinion on that. And then, yeah, that was one of her main questions. So I'm guessing that is once the consultants come in and start kind of telling us all that stuff, that's going to be a big component of that is economic development, real estate. Mm-hmm. I thought it was I was kind of taken back by it at first because I said, well, downtowns are typically in the middle of your town, so annexation and stuff like that. But she asked it, and she asked it for a reason, and I'm guessing that's because it's a big part of it. Glenn, you'd know better than I would.
Yeah, shoot, that's a logical question for them to do, and then we can also, we do have an opportunity to expand our downtown area.
Right.
We have some properties that the city owns that we could turn. Where the obvious one is over here with the old police station, which was a commercial operation at one time back in the day, a flower shop, and we have some other ones that we could actually do too. So that is a part of that, how you want to reconfigure your downtown and what you want your downtown to look like, and all those things will play into that. So
Sure.
Can we build up? Yeah, I think there's a possibility of that. So those are all things we can get into as we progress down the road with that program. So that's all part of it.
I think building out, so there's been some discussion, the Economic Development Corporation discussed it and checked in with some people in Lawrence. Building up is going to be a hefty task because you have to tear off the building, re-engineer the whole building to make sure it can hold a second story. So I don't know if I would put a lot of cards on that table, but I definitely think that if we look at our community as a whole, and you say, okay, if we can develop more commercial space out on the highway, well, that should lead to more opportunities in our downtown. You hope that, businesses move, as was mentioned, out of downtown and grow and stay within your community, but grow within your community.
Yeah.
And lead to other opportunities.
Yeah, I should correct. I didn't mean adding new construction on top of. I meant the already existing buildings that have vacant space on top of it. I can already think of 2 off the top of my head.
Right.
That's.
I'd love to see that old bank refurbished into what it used to look like. If you've seen pictures of that,
You ever been up there? It is.
I saw the video.
Me, Lynn, and Brian took us on a tour up there when we were doing his interview for the Main Street presentation, and I didn't even know it existed up there. It was an old, I think there's 13, 14 rooms up there maybe. It's an old hotel.
Uh-huh.
Oh, wow.
They still have the
No
numbers on
idea.
the doors.
Really?
It's insane. Like it's got like the crazy old like hotel carpet from the old days. It's wild. It's kind of eerie because all the windows are boarded up. You know, so if you look at the bank from the outside, it's like there's a shell over it. But you just look out to a concrete wall. There's just nothing there. It's kind of eerie, but you can imagine that being lifted off of there and that brick being revealed. And anyway, yeah, it is exciting to think about. But
That's the reason for my question. It sounds like we don't know enough about Main Street, but based on the description, it probably doesn't necessarily address commercial and residential challenges we might have outside of Main Street, outside of downtown. Thus the need for a separate task force that maybe they come together once we figure out, hey, we're trying to solve the same problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't feel like maybe they will completely overlap.
Absolutely.
right.
So ballpark, and you may not know the answer to this, but how close would we be to consultants coming in and working with us in the program for Main Street?
I think it's pretty quick. I think it's right after they announce, and then
Yeah,
They come-
and then there's a national conference that's coming up. It's going to be all virtual, unfortunately, this year. So that comes up pretty quick, and then you go right into the training. I don't know when they bring the marketing consultant in, though. But it's pretty quick into the process, though. But that's one of the first things you do is a market study for downtown. So that's pretty valuable information right there.
Right.
That you get right off the bat. And that should drive a lot of the conversation about who is our market, who are we trying to reach? And it sounds like basic questions, but a lot of people just, so I mean, who are we trying to market Baldwin City to? And I think that's one of the key questions we never really answered as a city since I've been here. I've been kind of asking that question, what's the identity of Baldwin City? And if we're trying to reach somebody outside Baldwin City, who are we marketing to? And what's the message we're trying to send them? Why would they come to Baldwin City? Was it tourism? Is it Maple Leaf? Or is it, are they coming here to shop? Or are they coming here to do what? Are they coming here to start a business? Or are they coming here to live? And who are we targeting? Is it people in Douglas County, Johnson County? People who are outside the state? Who is it we're trying to get to move to and stay in Baldwin City?
Right.
Who's our target audience? And I think we need to do that at some point. Otherwise, we're just kind of, we can throw incentive. We can throw the incentives like the NRP out there, half off building permits and whatever. Great programs, I like, but I don't know if we've ever really refined a message and kind of defined who we're trying to reach. And I think it's a major challenge for us. So, if you can get that by Friday, I really appreciate it.
So, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, I think when you talk about growing the commercial and, potential light industrial, you kind of need to figure out what that means, because I've always wondered, where do you go promote that? What your strengths are, and try to, are there conferences you go to, for light industry and you promote your assets as a community? But I think to your point, we got to figure out what that might look like, and then we can start to ask the question: well, how do we get this message out effectively? And same for residential. Always wondered how you actually go to attract new businesses. Do they stumble upon you, or do you actually go pursue it?
Depends on the business you're trying to get. I mean, if you're looking at Casey's, they find you.
Right.
They're doing their market studies, and they're going to have more information about Baldwin City than we're ever going to develop. I mean, they got people who do this every day. They're crunching numbers and they're looking for those opportunities. So we can market ourselves somewhat to those types of business, but mainly they find you, and then you got to be available. You got to have a lot, and we have to go through all the rezoning and all that stuff. But if they're committed to coming and they've identified you as a profitable market, they will find you. The other business, if you're talking about manufacturing and things like that, but it's going to be tough because of our labor force. I mean, if you talk to any of our current manufacturers, they'll tell you their major challenge is finding workers, skilled workers with the right skills to come there. So that's going to be a tough haul for them, because the labor is just so tight on that. It just really is. So I was talking to Rice Manufacturing a couple of years ago. They said they could double their size if they could find enough workers, but they can't find enough workers.
So I think that kind of leads into, that is the issue. Do you try to solve the problem? It's a housing issue potentially to attract workers that will at least live here close enough that they get attracted. And then maybe it's a training issue. But I think we can find out what the issues are, and then we got to decide, can we do anything about it?
Well, they prefer to get graduates from Washburn Tech. That's where they prefer to get there. But those, once they go through that program, it's like you've got the golden ticket to go really almost anywhere. So you can send our high school kids to Washburn Tech, but most of them are not going to stay here. So they send a van full of students to Washburn Tech every day from our high school, but most of them do not want to stay in this area. I'm not sure why that is, but I don't know if it's pay, just they don't want to stay in their hometown or whatever it is. Just like they can't get most of them to go to Baker University, they don't want to stay that close to town. So I'm not sure what that is. So the training is available, but we're more likely to export those people with skills than keep them here. And so that's really tough to see them trained and then go somewhere else. Oh well, you can't keep them down. I mean, it's really a tough sell. So I don't know if I've got a real good answer to that, but I've listened to them long enough. All our manufacturers will say the same thing. They've got good jobs, and those are great companies out there that are homegrown and they're worldwide. I mean, they sell their products worldwide. It's just finding those right skills for those people, and it's just been really tough for them to do. That was before the pandemic, and I suspect it's even tougher now. So, so we can keep trying that. That's about workforce development, and we can keep going down that road. So, I don't think we should give up, and I know they're not going to. So that's a part of it, and it really is.
Yeah, I think the task force can have a lot of variables to go try to figure out. I mean, they're all connected, right?
Right.
And some you might be able to impact, others you won't. But at least identify what they are. I mean, growth may not be even viable for a reason like you just articulated that we can't solve.
Yeah, we even have trouble getting skilled labor just for our jobs at the city, whether it's the water plant, sewer plant, or electric, whatever. They're in high demand, and once they get certified, and they've got a lot of opportunities out there. So if you're a young kid starting out now, college is a great way to go. But if you've got any ambition about those, dirty jobs that you see on TV or whatever with Mike Rowe, there's plenty of opportunities out there for those types of jobs right now. But it's hard to attract people into that industry for a lot of reasons. So it's going to be an uphill challenge, no question.
Should we add that to this task force as something we would like someone to try to focus on, workforce development? I know our chamber used to do that.
They
I don't
did.
know if they still do, but maybe that's something that this consolidated chamber, whatever it's going to be called, could continue.
Workforce development and retention. Yeah.
I think if you look at commercial growth, just as the umbrella, you're going to go, well, how do I do that? And you're going to start figuring it out. It's going to lead, one of the parts is going to lead right there. I can't grow if I can't get anybody to work here.
Okay.
And if the businesses are part of this, they will, or we go seek their input, they'll provide why, do you want to grow if you could? Would you? Why can't you? And share those reasons. So part of it, they're going to go find that out. And then.
And some of it's gonna be just based on our location. I mean, when you got intermodal 10 miles down the road and they're paying a pretty darn good wage, I mean, to a lot of jobs, that's tough for a small business to compete against, so there's gonna be some variables in there that we
some of it may not be solvable.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason, probably a reason why it's grown or lack thereof to where it's at right now.
Yeah, and it's a long-term problem, and we
It
have
is.
to have a long-term solution to that, and it's just not going to be easy to do. And if it were, everybody'd be doing it, and we'd all be swimming and whatever. But it just
you got to start if you want to try to tackle it. You got to go try to start it, or it'll never happen.
And our industries will tell you. I mean, if you want to ask them, they're not going to hold back on what they need for business growth. They'll tell you they're pretty forthright about that. There's no question about it. So you got those kinds of things going. And another thing I think we need to focus on, though, is we do have a four-year college across the street from us, and we got KU up the road, and how many of those graduates stay in Douglas County, Baldwin City, or anywhere near us? Well, we got one right there. But again, that's very hard to keep one. We got one.
Just this guy.
There's a few of us.
Oh, yeah,
I like
that. But most of them, as we know, if they're business majors, nursing, they're leaving for bigger cities with more opportunity, then they're assuming they're going to get paid more, and they are some other city, but they don't realize once they get to that city, it's a higher cost to live there too. So it cuts both ways, and the lifestyle might not be what they want. So, but I think we're in a great position here in Baldwin City to really capture the stay-at-home market now. So many of the people are getting used to staying at home and working from home, and
What a better place to work from home.
Right?
what about there? I don't think there is a better place.
There you go.
I really don't.
I mean,
That's it.
That's
Put it on a billboard in Johnson County.
There's your slogan right there.
There's our marketing.
Yeah, I don't think there is. I think we could capitalize on that
Yeah.
market right now because there's so many people who want a low-cost, small city, and they don't want to be commuting. They're not going to be commuting, but we got 2 gigabit providers here, high-speed internet providers. We have a small town. We have a small university here. Relatively low cost compared to Johnson County, I would think.
I love it. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
So to me, that's your market. I think we need to kind of position ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, that lands in the residential growth spectrum,
Yeah.
not the commercial growth, but they're both, we need to look at both. But
Yeah.
the work from home is not gonna be, commercial, tax base growth or any of that, but it's still something that is part of the residential, growth plan, can certainly be a focus.
well, as Casey's talked about, senior citizens, we were talking about that in
Yeah.
committee. You might expand on what you notice.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting quite a few seniors that want to move here, and part of that, I think my theory is, as a senior citizen and driving, and they want to still, move around as much as possible. It's much easier to drive in Baldwin City, Kansas than it is in Lawrence or Overland Park or anything like that. I would say that in Fire Tree, the new subdivision Fire Tree, I think this is what we talked about, is, out of those houses that were built there, 2 of them were families. All the rest were seniors that had purchased those houses. And they came everywhere from Gardner. I know of, 2 or 3 from the country that, wanted to downsize and move into town. One from Lawrence is moving in here. So we're getting seniors look at Baldwin because, one, we do have a good location. I mean, if your kids live in Topeka, Lawrence, or Kansas City, and you don't want to deal with that traffic, Baldwin City is perfect. We're not very far from any of them. So that is a huge growth point, I think, for us. And we have good health care right here. It's not, we don't have a hospital, but we have local doctors and local clinics and physical therapy place and, everything that seniors really need, a grocery store and all that stuff. So I think we are primed for that senior development. Plus, if you look at, I know that the new senior development, they have 28 units and they have 40 people on that list. So essentially, as soon as they flip the switch and they're open, they're full. And that'll help lead to more housing, I think. I think as those senior, a lot of them are, I would assume, I don't know, are Baldwin folks. So, as they move out of their houses in Baldwin, that'll, release some of that housing for other people to move in. But we're fortunate that, seniors are looking at Baldwin, because I know less than 3 years ago, we were having seniors move out of Baldwin because there was no type of living that accommodated their needs at that time in their life. So they're moving to Lawrence and different things. But that might be also something we could focus on in the commercial growth, is maybe one of those facilities that, I don't know the name of it, up on North 6th Street, or up on 6th Street in Lawrence, but essentially it's a building with apartments in it. They have a chef there, they get fed.
Assisted living, like,
Kind of like assisted living, but
Brandon Woods.
yeah, Brandon Woods.
Meadowlark, they
Yeah.
have a.
But maybe we go out, and I think that is one area we could target and start going out and talking to those folks that set those up around the country. Say, hey, we think we have a good, a good community for that, and here's why.
Yeah. So would we have to annex some land into Baldwin?
Yeah, we don't have a big enough piece. We would definitely have to identify land, talk to the landowner, work hand in hand with them, and try to go after them. But Eudora's been successful in it. You know, so I don't see why we couldn't be successful in it. You know, and if you look at, like when Walmart was going to come into town 5, 6, 7 years ago, they tracked it and they were coming to Walmart based on people's credit cards. That's how Walmart knew where their shoppers were coming from. Obviously, you know, Brandon Woods, different places like that, can't track them, so I think those are the type of entities you have to go after. You have to seek them out because they're probably not going to seek us out as much. But then that's when we got to get creative as a community and as a city and say, what are we going to do then to help them come? You know, and I think again, for something like that, you know, the NRP is a good one. You know, we might need to look at some infrastructure. You know, how can we make this very viable for them to come into a small community?
Well, I think if we have that task force, at least to a point where CDC takes that and we develop it and bring it back, we can move on to this toolbox and maybe just run through these. And if anybody doesn't understand some of these things, because I know when I first started, some of it was hard to understand, stop us. But these are things that we came up with in committee, and we probably left things out, or there's other opportunities that are always available. But Casey, you want to talk about the NRP a little bit?
Yeah, so the NRP was passed, expires next March 1st, March 1st of 2022 it expires. We do have a group of citizens that are going to try to renew that to get 5 more years on. Essentially what the NRP is if you rehab a property and it increases your property tax at least 10%, then your taxes on that 10% are abated. Anything over that 10% are abated. If you build a brand new property, doesn't matter if it's commercial or residential, your taxes are abated. You cannot abate the land so if your lot's $600, you always pay the $600. And actually with an NRP, you still pay all your property taxes when you get a check back.
Right.
You also can't abate the state portion of the school tax. So they call it 100% because 100% of the property tax is abated, is given back. It's just those portions that are not. So, and it lasts for 5 years. Very good program. It's been very beneficial for us, and that has been some of the things that the seniors and families that have bought new properties, that was part of the reason they were able to buy a new property like that. So that's kind of the NRP in a real short nutshell. We're different in a way where we included our whole community in the NRP. We just didn't concentrate on one single area. But before the NRP, I think we were building, Glenn, you can correct me if I'm wrong, 5 to 8 properties per year, and now we're pushing closer to 20.
Oh, probably even less than that. I mean, I asked Brad when I got here how many housing starts were in the previous year, and he said 2. I mean,
Yeah,
so
it was
we were averaging
pretty.
very few housing starts until we came up with the NRP.
And
Yeah.
that number's about 20 now, you think?
Yeah, I think so. Ed's got a lot of stats. He's been really running that program
Yeah.
since we put that in 4 years ago. And so we're going to kind of evaluate the program here pretty soon and just kind of pull out the stats of what, the amount of money that's been invested in and how much taxes have been abated and, what we've gotten out, how many housing starts. And as Casey said, it also works on the commercial end too. And we didn't limit it. The only sort of flaw in the program is if you annex territory right now, you can't take advantage of it because it's defined by the legal description of the entire city.
Right.
So when we pass this, I don't know how we get around that. There's got to be a way to do that because if we're going to annex more territory, we want the NRP as part of that if we get a second round of this. So we're going to have to probably rewrite the ordinance some way, somehow at this time. And I don't know how we do that and conform to state law because you have to still do that. So that'll be interesting. But yeah, it's been a great program to drive incentive. I mean, what happens is what people do is they take the money that they would have given to us in taxes in that 5 years and they put it into their property. So they build a bigger building is what they do. They build a bigger house, they put it in their business, they add on to that. And in 5 years, we get a bigger tax chunk because they built something bigger that's assessed higher. That's the payoff for us.
And the payoff for us, to be quite frank, is, the property tax, the majority goes to the school district, and the county and city kind of split the rest. But You know, the majority of our budget's made up from our utilities. So the more housing or businesses we add on, that helps pay for our infrastructure that's already even been built. As, you know, kind of parlays into what was discussed in the finance committee about the meter fees and different things like that.
Right.
So there's a lot of different benefits. You know, I think it's been definitely a good program. It's just something we can push a little bit more.
Yeah, and we really like it, and I know Ed is a big proponent of it too, is that, it's budget neutral, you're not giving up anything. So it's not like we're handing somebody, money as they're coming, because you didn't have, if somebody wasn't gonna build, you're gonna get 100% of nothing. So, as they come in and build, you didn't lose anything, you're just foregoing it for a certain amount of time, so it's kind of like an annuity or something like that.
Right.
So it's not like it says this huge impact on our budget where we're sitting here giving away money through a corporation to come in and we're doing all these things for them. This is just foregoing the benefits until a certain time period. That's all you're doing with the NRP. So it's a lot easier on our budget is what it is.
If you look around our community, you know, a lot of the properties have been here for 100, 150 years. So that 5-year give up, I guess you'd say, or forego of that tax pays you back for 100, 150 years. So that's where I guess I kind of see it as a partnership type thing. So.
Okay, anything else on the NRP? We good on that one?
Good.
Okay, so we'll put that in and maybe check back in on that as we do this quarterly check-in. Half-price building permits, we found out that those extend through 2025. Is it really anything?
No, I mean, again, it's just one of those incentives that, you know, if you look at what it really costs the city to do any of the services that are under that building permit, and what other communities are charging for that, that's an incentive for builders to keep building in Baldwin because they can lower their price of their house by that extra $5,000 to beat out a house maybe in Eudora that, you know, is double our cost. So just helps that out essentially.
Any questions from the council on half-price building permits? Net metering, I put this on economic development. It can be looked at different ways, but it's something we talked about in legislative committee. You want to?
Yeah, I mean, net metering was capped out when we first came on council. Within the first, 30 days, we increased it, more than doubled it. At that time, we're starting to push that limit again. So it's something that the utilities committee is probably going to have to take another look at, as well as we've been told, so we need to probably take another look at it, that our ordinance may restrict storage of that power. So I'd like to see that kind of removed if that's the case, because, but net metering, we are very giving in our net metering. I mean, if whatever you're producing it out is the credit that is given to you on your bill, where a lot of other communities maybe, you know, if you're selling it kilowatt at 11 cents a kilowatt hour, they may only give you credit for 8 cents on that same kilowatt, where we do penny for penny on our net metering. So no, we don't. A lot of misconception is that the city give back checks, and we don't do that. It's just a credit, and it stops. If you produce more power than what you used in that month, that just rolls back on the grid. It's not, you don't get paid out from the city.
Just for clarity, in case of people listening, just describe what net metering means.
Net metering is when you have solar panels on your property, then you get a credit for the power that solar panel creates, essentially. That's what it is. We're fortunate. I mean, you drive around, and I mean, the first year that we upped this, Brian, if you remember, John Deere put in a huge solar system on their building. So, you know, Mid-America Bank has solar. You drive around town, I would say per capita, I don't think I've ever driven through a small town that has more solar panels on the roofs than what we have here. I see it as a benefit to the city because that, you know, our peak demand is during the hottest of the summer. So if people are generating more of their solar, well, that's taking the load off of our system if our power goes down, because then they're creating more energy. So.
think all of this speaks to Glenn's point about how do we market ourselves as a community, and maybe this is a kind of cool tool.
I was just gonna say that I've noticed my personal experience in the community, a lot of the people I know that are newer residents or younger families. And I think it's a younger generation that's going to see that as an incentive to move here. So I think that's the kind of stuff that we need to mark. I mean, we'll see what the market study comes back with, but it seems like our school district is very attractive and just the small town living to young families. So I could definitely see that as being an incentive to move here. I was on utility council when we passed that ordinance, and I believe it made us like one of the most generous cities in the state of
Well, we are,
Kansas.
yeah, the other public utilities think we're out of our mind.
Right.
They think we've gone crazy in
Yeah.
Baldwin City, but, because ours is, yeah, much more generous, by far. And,
But I think to Brian's point too, to really capitalize on our net metering, I think we need to find out all the information on the tax credits too, to install those systems on your houses.
And that might increase too with Biden being such a.
Yeah, they
Well, I think they already extended that.
yeah,
Oh, did they?
yeah, he's
Oh,
already
okay.
extended another year, so.
Okay.
So, but if we can put that information out with, what the federal government does, I think that
Yeah.
could help. But
I have a question, kind of 101 here, but so let's say in July, you're really producing a lot of electricity, you have a lot of energy, and it's going back into the grid, right? You produce more than your house is using, it goes back. And when we say go back to the grid, is that just Baldwin City?
Yes.
Or is that,
Yes,
okay,
we never push back out on that. Actually, our transmission is not set up to push back on the grid at all right now.
Okay.
Outside the city. So it stays on our grid inside. So you're essentially feeding your neighbors.
so yeah, you're feeding your neighbors, so does that mean that, is that calculated in when you're?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Our meters, our smart meters can read both ways. So, well, okay, full disclosure, I just put in a solar array on my house. So I saw them do it. So they come in and they test it and they set it up, and what happens is, during that peak flow, you're flowing back the other way.
Right.
So we're taking that power, and like Casey said, we'll zero out your bill, but after that power is just coming to us, and we're using that on our grid here within Baldwin City.
I meant, how does it impact your neighbor's bill?
It
It
won't at all.
doesn't.
Okay, okay,
that's
You're just supplying, you're just another supplier on the grid.
okay, got it.
That's all you're doing, so you're pushing back into our system.
But
And we're buying it back at basically the rate we're selling it.
Correct,
So,
yeah.
you know,
But Corey, I guess to your point, when they put in because I looked at a solar system too,
Mhm.
they study your house. So they'll pull your electricity bills and say, okay, you use this, this is how many panels you should have. And I'd say 99% of them never produce more than what they're actually using.
Well, that's why I said July, because I imagine that'd be the only time you'd even have a chance at hitting it, or,
Well, actually, it'd be
Yeah.
more like March, April, when it's cool out and you're not using your
Oh, that's true, yeah.
electricity, but you're getting plenty of
Yeah,
sunlight.
you're using
That's-
more in July, yeah.
Yeah.
so.
So, yeah, but, yeah,
I've
our,
learned more about solar in the last 3 years than I have.
Oh, yeah.
Same.
That's a good thing.
Pretty new to it.
So theoretically, Corey, we just reduced the demand that we're buying.
That's what I was kind of
outside,
getting at.
right? It stays in,
Yes.
right? So
correct, that would be, okay, I see what you're.
Yeah, we have our
Would it impact?
demand for that day. and
Right,
If we're buying back internally, then it's less we have to buy extra.
correct.
Correct,
And that
right.
does happen.
Which,
Our highest rate is during those hot months in the summer.
Right.
When we're buying our electricity.
Right.
That's when it costs us the most money, or generating our own.
Right, and plus we got our own 1 megawatt solar field out there right now.
Right.
Which during the big energy crisis here, it did, even with snow on it, it did produce some electricity, not a lot. It did produce some of mine, come to think of it, so you can track all this stuff, so whatever. And it really helped out because even our demand for electricity during, when it was 20 below zero, those days, our highest demand for electricity was right in the middle of the day. So, and that's when our solar was actually producing the most too, because it just does, because the way the sun hits it right now. So it worked out all the way around, so good job for everybody. The lights stayed on.
Yeah, the
Yeah, they
lights
did.
stay on.
Yes.
They really did, so.
Thank God.
Anything else on solar? We good? Okay, fire tree development. You got on that?
So there is about, I want to say 30 lots coming on in Fire Tree. The first initial phase that was just done, they're pretty much almost built out. There's probably 2 or 3 lots left. in the fire tree area. So they're getting ready to do that. I'd say March, April, they'll be breaking ground, so they'll have lots by fall. But I think that's about 30 left in that blue, I call it the blue stem loop. And then there's still other land available there, but I think the next agenda item you have on there will be the more interesting one to talk about.
Okay. So any questions on that? That's pretty straightforward. We'll move on to annexation and use.
So on this, we talked a little bit in committee, and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, about if we truly want people to annex land, there's very few landowners that own land around our community. I think you almost have to look at possibly tying that into the NRP, and what I mean by that is I hear a lot of developers talk, well, I don't want to develop this land because I'm getting taxed on it as ag land, which is very inexpensive tax, but as soon as I put in the streets, the sewer, and the sidewalks, now I'm getting taxed on each lot, and that can be very expensive. I know in Fire Tree, in Phase 4A or 4, the last lot out of that subdivision, out of the initial Fire Tree, just sold within the last 5 years. And that developer paid more money in taxes than what he ended up getting out of that lot because of the time it takes involvement to build out all those. So some developers have mentioned, or some landowners, not developers, landowners have mentioned, hey, why don't you wrap that into the NRP, and then when a structure is built on there, that's when you start taxing, or when a building permit, that's when you start taxing on that lot. I don't know if that can be done. I mean, that's something we'd have to look at. But I'm just telling you from the last 4 or 5 years that we've been talking to landowners, that's kind of the sentiment we've heard is it's really hard to throw out a 100 lot development and then the market turns south and you're sitting on 60 lots that are being taxed at $600 a year. You know, that's a lot of money per year. So development costs are up. I mean, they're no different than building costs. They're, you know, people are saying, well, how are the lots $40,000, $45,000, $50,000? Well, that's because the development costs, you know, when they use $20,000, $35,000, $40,000 per lot to develop. We're fortunate in Baldwin. What we do as a city is the developer pays for the hard costs on the electricity, but we will install it. So that free of charge. That's been Baldwin's long-running way to help get development in town. But that's just one piece of, you know, when you talk about electricity, water, sewer, sidewalks, and streets, that's curbs and gutters and retention bonds and all that type of stuff. There's a lot of expense there. So that may be something that we may, you know, as we discuss as a group, see if there's any interest in, if we truly want to grow our borders, how are we going to do that?
I think the other thing is to pay attention to what the county's been talking about lately too, because those rules seem to be getting, I don't know how to say it, more strict or tighter year by year, and they're talking about
Correct.
even more as far as.
They're talking about even more. And I think we can really capitalize as a city on that. If we are, you know, work with people, work with landowners, more people may be, you know, where it used to be, we have houses in our community where the city limits is around their house because they refuse to come into the city. You know, maybe we can flip the script on that. Now, people that are in county want to be in the city because it may be easier for them. So, as well as, you know, like Brian's heard me talk about this. I love where Brian lives on those 3-acre lots. Doing septic systems, state law allows you to do septic systems on 3 acres. I think as we look at housing, you need every tier of housing. You know, the upper end housing, the moderate income housing, and the lower income housing. So I like those ideas too, because then that reduces the expense to the developer as well. Because, you know, like Brian, correct? Do you have ditches out there, or do you have curb and gutter?
No, it's a ditch.
Okay. So like a lot of the developments have ditches, so you don't have to worry about, you know, the sidewalks, you don't have to worry about the curb and gutter, all of that. And since it's bigger lots, your water runoff isn't as impactful to everybody else, so, because you have less rooftops in a
Sure.
larger area. You know, as you look at development, a developer's gonna look at an acre and say, okay, each acre I should be able to get about 3 houses per acre. So if I'm buying 20 acres to develop, that should be 60 lots total, give or take. But that's just a quick rule of thumb. But like I said, I really like the 3 acre lots that they have out there. I've always loved that area. Just, it gives you a little bit of the country feel inside the city limits. So something to also talk about.
Any other thoughts on annexation? We'll just keep an eye on that, and I'm sure Ed will continue working on those things.
Yeah, I mean, really, till this last year, our city limits hasn't grown in over a decade, I think. So I think annexation is really key, part of sustainability to, you know,
What?
I don't want to be Gardner by any means. You know,
Right.
I don't want to be Gardner, I don't want to be Lawrence, I don't want to be any of that. But nice planned growth is, I think is healthy.
Well, I think the task force would have a pretty heavy hand.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
It needs to be approached the same way that it's commercial. I mean, it's almost 2 separate tracks because we need to go out and define what the commercial entities look for. There'll be a completely different set of problems.
Right.
And then you go to the landowners and developers and ask them about what they view as their needs to be part of the growth. There'll be a completely different set of problems.
Sure.
It's almost like I don't know if there's even overlap. So I guess if you get into it and it becomes so, to do it right, it may take two task forces going down different paths.
Sure.
Because I'm not sure any of that's going to overlap.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think if you look at just the annexation piece, it overlaps a little bit because if you take in a large parcel of ground, modern city planning now is commercial,
Right.
multifamily, single family.
Right.
So that's kind of where they do overlap just a little bit.
Yeah, I guess if part of the lack of commercial growth is lack of buildable area, then yeah, absolutely, it becomes maybe a different set of challenges for a landowner to sell to a commercial entity.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think if you get with a lot of the developers though, that's, as you look at like Eudora and who own that property that they develop, they have ties in different organizations. So a lot of times developers will develop a large tract of land with a key tenant already in place, or they already know of a key tenant that's going to take this area and then develop out from there. So but in not too far in the past, we had a problem even filling up our 2 strip malls up on 56 Highway.
Oh, yeah.
So that wasn't, we kind of flipped. we had a problem within the last decade of filling those up, and now we have a problem of finding spaces for businesses to go. So I'll take the latter of the 2.
Yeah. Okay, city-owned buildable lots and property. Glenn mentioned downtown stuff like the old police station. Casey, you want to expand on what we talked about?
Yeah. So I've looked through. I can get on the county and kind of see what is owned. I found a couple, and I've talked to Glenn about this. There's one lot over on, I think it's Lincoln Street or right over here, that the city owns. I don't know why they own it. It's literally already a platted lot. It does have a little flood zone on the corner of it. So I don't know if maybe the flood zone came up and all that, and nobody could sell, so the city just took it over, or what, I don't know. But it's a buildable lot, so that was one of them. Also, the land that the city annexed of mine, there was a cutout going into that land for future development, but I have known, it's not going to be developed. So the city might as well take that cutout because it's the same shape as what a buildable lot is and turn it into an actual lot, because otherwise it's just unusable space that the city's using. What Glenn alluded to earlier, the old red barn we're just using for storage. We're probably going to look at getting an appraisal on that and surveying that off and doing things there. Basically that whole half of the block isn't really being utilized much for the city besides storage. So that's a way, when we talk about Main Street and expanding our downtown, that is a way that we can expand our downtown as well as Glenn's had about 3 people, I think, reach out about the old police station to put a business in
Yeah,
there.
so far, and we haven't even advertised anything yet,
Yeah,
so.
so, and you know, we talked about making that in the council chambers, but honestly, if we have businesses that want to be downtown and using it, I don't want to sell it as a city, because, you know, when you sell property that's attached to you, you're never going to get it back. It's, you know, but leasing it out to expand our economic benefit downtown, I think, is a smart move for us, because we can be fluid with our council meetings just like we always have. So that's the property that we've talked about. I think Glenn's working on getting surveyors lined up and appraisals and different things, and coming up with a strategy to put those back on the property tax roll. We still have that one lot up on 56, or 2 lots, sorry, the 2 lots.
Yeah.
Old motel lot being the biggest one, and then the one next to the creek that is a little bit more of a challenge that the city's owned for quite a while. So we do have some property. We might as well, you know, if we're talking about economic impact in our community, we need to look at what we have as well and get those out too. So if we're not utilizing, that's all I have on that.
Last thing I had in the toolbox, and if anybody has more, we can add it. Chamber Main Street EDC, I think we talked enough about Main Street and the direction that's going. One of the things Scott and I talked about in the committee is making sure that the council gets good information back from the groups that we approve funding for. So we both felt, and Casey felt this too, that the infrastructure of Main Street will help with that.
Yeah.
Once the Chamber and Main Street figure out what it's going to do.
Right.
You know, and since COVID has been around, we just don't get as many reports from groups and things like that anymore. So hopefully that will start to open back up too. But that's why I had that on here. If anybody else has any other points they want to talk about with that.
No, there's just, I mean, there's a lot of unknowns. I mean, you know, they haven't even formally consolidated yet, because we haven't even got an announcement, and just, we don't, and then, you know, then they're going to come in from, you know, from outside with their consultants, etc. That's going to have a whole different roadmap that maybe we could come out even right here. So they've done this in a lot of towns, lots and lots of towns. They're experts across the nation. You know, they've dealt with a lot of towns that look pretty close to Baldwin too, and can kind of give you some guidance there. So I think we just kind of got to, it's kind of gnawing at the bit to do something with it, but we got to wait and get the proper guidance and get some of these big questions answered about how this is going to look.
Okay. Any other points on Chamber Main Street EDC? If not, the only other thing that I had was in legislative committee, we talked about options for completing this strategic plan. If we're comfortable with how things are going, we talked about our quality of life section, and then we had the work session on the community center, that extra data that we've talked about compiling. Scott, remind me, we were sort of talking about on a larger scale.
Yeah, I think the gap in part of this, so we're getting a lot of good feedback from the people we talk to, and then bringing it in this group, but we really haven't done the outreach for community input as to a strategic plan, and that takes, you know, there's people that know how to do that well, just like there's people that know how to survey and all that. So, you know, I guess we talked about not really thinking that we just do these 4 sessions with these pillars and think we have a strategic plan. I think it's kind of a baseline that this group thinks is a starting point, but then we've got to somehow get that to the community, get feedback, and change it accordingly. And that probably is going to take more than the skill sets we have here over time. So we talked about, does it make sense to reach back out to, you know, to KU and see what that would look like? Because I know she had some of that in her menu of things to do. So I think it's open for discussion if we think that's an important part of coming up with a strategic plan that, you know, we're all comfortable with and the community's comfortable with. So that's what we talked about. And I think we need to, as a group, decide if that's what we want to do as part of the continuation of this.
I definitely think we can see what the cost would be. I mean, I think that'd be the first step, is see what they charge for that.
Yep.
Wasn't Sean here gonna check into something?
So that, I think that was different. That was more for a community support of you know, they're going to come and reach out about needs for rec community center.
Okay.
I think what this is, obviously we're talking about infrastructure, we're talking about all these other things and just
Right.
quality of life. it's that input as well.
That's right.
To say, hey, this is a strategic plan that was developed in council. We got the appropriate level of input, which is difficult in the pandemic. And I think these professionals will have a better idea of how to do that during these times and get quality results. So I think it's worth checking to see the cost of that and then deciding if that is worth, getting the input in a correct, and I'll say correctly, but what they believe is the correct way. I'd have a hard time figuring out how to get that appropriately.
You're talking about the community outreach portion of it, yeah.
Yeah.
And we talked about, talking to all the groups and, all them, and then really getting down in the community, try to have them help us. How do we get to the, citizen that may not be involved as much, but we still want to hear their feedback type of thing, so.
Yeah, and I think professionals have figured out the best way to do that.
Yeah.
And maybe we look into it and see what they would suggest.
We'll check in with that, and then we'll bring it back next work session.
Right. I think timing wise, we thought, I think this initial pass of how, with Brian's leadership and structuring it this way, we've come out with, I think, what the council thinks are priorities for sure. And then, I think we can target having something, quote unquote, first pass finalized by the end of the year is, hey, this is the strategic plan that we're moving forward with. I think it'd be a great goal. It'll probably take us that long to have those discussions, get feedback, talk about changing it, and when we meet like once a month or every other month on this, it's going to take for the rest of the year to do it right, I think. So that was kind of what we talked about as a goal, having this strategic plan of this council finalized by the end of the year.
I think I'll take every bit of that.
Yeah, it's aggressive.
Just for the community outreach, it's just going to take a
Yeah, I think, I agree. But yeah, we don't know what we don't know, but put a goal out there and try to meet it, and we'll adjust if we have to.
Okay, so we feel that that's the direction we want to go with that. The only other thing that I had was, sounds like we got some goals for our two major things that we had talked about for economic development, and we're seeking help. And then also for the next work session, we'll talk about infrastructure. So I believe we are getting information compiled for that. And are we inviting department heads to that?
Yep, they'll be here for that one.
What we talked about in committee is, actually it was a different committee. It was Public Works that we talked about.
I think we talked about it in budget and finance. I'm like, were you there?
But we talked about how Rob asked, is this more of a CIP where I'm coming in with price tags for trucks and things like that? And we decided, no, this is more of a higher level, kind of a needs assessment, what's urgent, more of a higher level type meeting than a.
Yeah, we don't want to get too granular on.
Right.
Hey, I need 3 trucks next year. We need to see the bigger picture.
So, and I know Rob's working on that in that committee.
So in that committee, are they looking at some of the ideas that the council has put forth, such as the streets and burying power lines? Are they going to have an idea of timeline and cost of those things?
No, I think we should definitely ask them
Yeah.
and talk about that next.
So those points that we brought up.
Those are multi-year.
Correct.
Put it in the budget, make sure it's in the budget, and even before you can start doing it. So that's the longer range view, as opposed to, hey, we have immediate needs that need to be in the 2022 budget. Obviously, we need to discuss that, but it's really those longer term things that, again, the strategic plan hasn't been finalized, but we have some ideas. And part of that discussion with the community is going to be realistically cost and timelines. Right? If you want to bury all the power lines, here's the cost, and here would be the timeline to do it all.
I can bring that up at our next meeting and give them an idea of what we're looking at.
Do we want to use the things that we came up with at that session? We had bury power lines, expand solar and fiber, develop a plan for rural water district to provide service outside the city, build the trail, evaluate whether to retain brick streets. It's a big one. Determine what to do with the old utility plant, adopt an all streets plan, identify alternative utility options, consider second substation, which we're in the process of, modernize utilities, replace lift stations, evaluate utility reserve fund policy, which is probably finance then, establish a truck route and repair and replace and add curbs.
I think that's absolutely items we need to be.
Yeah, but does that just bury them? I mean, that's a lot. I
Some of
mean,
these kind of go together.
Yeah, they do, but I don't even know. I mean,
But some of them won't even cost anything. I mean, like,
that's
develop a
true.
truck route.
I mean,
let's,
I'd love to give them the task and say, please come prepared to discuss this with data, but I don't want to, they got day jobs to do. So I don't know if prioritizing that makes sense. If you think giving them the whole list and having them come back and being prepared, I'm good with that.
well, I think we can definitely give them a list. And that way they can be prepared for the meeting.
We already have some of that information,
Okay.
and we might not have everything that you're looking for, but
Okay.
we'll get real close to it.
Okay.
Because a lot of these questions have been asked before, so we've kind of done estimates. Just really, it's kind of refreshing those at this point.
Perfect.
And doing some updates on the cost estimates, but a lot of it has been discussed already, so yeah, it won't be a huge burden to update it, I don't think. So,
Good. Yeah. Give it to them.
I don't think, yeah, no, just get all of what you're thinking, put it on the table right
Hey
now.
guys, we want this figured out by next year. We'll do our current budget.
Yeah, we gotta start somewhere, so.
Yeah, and I guess
Lay it out
if they can't, I mean, some of them may say, hey, we need more time to do this right, here's what we know, and
Right.
well, here's what we don't know.
Right.
And then we decide if it's high enough priority, ask them to go back and get the rest.
Well, and I think part of it too is just open up the discussion. Just,
Yeah.
they're gonna have a lot of knowledge just on those items alone. Just saying, hey, what's feasible? That's what I'd like to know. What is a feasible time frame to bury all our power lines? If that's the way the city wants to go,
Right.
is 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, what does that look like? So, just things like that. The truck route thing, I think public safety has been talking and working on that a little bit anyway, so. Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's a good plan.
All right,
I'm ready to hear that.
that's all I have.
I'm good. Thank you all. Thank you. Spending your nice evening with us.
All I gotta say is, I'm glad you texted me.